Mamie belle, la moustache et la capuchon. Sito patamilo, minata katiki bunetika. Sito patamilo, minata katiki bunetika. Sito patamilo, minata katiki bunetika. Sito patamilo, minata katiki takatiki. Sito patamilo, minata katiki bunetika. Sito patamilo, minata katiki bunetika. Sito patamilo, minata katiki bunetika. Mamie belle, la moustache et la capuchon.
What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show. And today, I'm going to talk about the upcoming divisional round games of the NFL playoffs. If you want to see what I said about the Commanders versus the Detroit Lions, I actually have a separate video for that in that preview show. But this is the preview for all the other teams still remaining in the playoffs and the games that are coming up. So I'm going to start with the first game that I feel may be more competitive than what people think, but I think that people will understand what the outcome is going to be. And that game, and shout out to my man Richard Wright of my BCL family, but the first game is the Houston Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, we saw what Houston did we saw what Houston could do when it comes to defense and the type of pressure they can bring when it comes to really putting it on teams. And they're going to go up against a Kansas City Chiefs team that has been off for a while, hasn't been the strongest offensively, but defensively they're running into one of the best probably defensive Kansas City Chiefs teams that has been since the Andy Reid tenure. This defense for the Kansas City Chiefs has been very strong this season, and they've kept that team in the whole time. So now with that, they're going up against a formidable offense, an offense that does feature Joe Mixon at running back, who basically had a very good day last week. And at the same time, they also feature Nico Collins, John Mechie, and Robert Woods. So we're going to have to see Robert Woods and John Mechie come up big in this game if Houston does sit up there and have any type of chance. But when you think about all that, when it comes to Houston, the one key thing that matters the most, the one thing that will be the driving force to help Houston actually win this game is C.J. Stroud. And to be fairly honest and fairly consistent with this, C.J. Stroud hasn't looked his best coming into the playoffs, and in the first game of the playoffs, he hasn't looked his strongest. That doesn't mean he can't get better or he won't be better in this game. It's just that currently right now he hasn't looked his strongest, and he's kind of going through the sophomore slump, which is understandable. But at the same time, when you're in the playoffs, you really gotta step it up, because in reality, that Houston playoff game that they had, it was closer than it should have been. And that was the thing that I think concerned me the most when it came to them, is that how close that game actually could have been. But the fact that they ripped it off, it is what it is. But, still, C.J. Stroud should have, if C.J. Stroud would have done more, I think that game wouldn't have been, don't get me wrong, they blew them out. They blew the Chargers out. But still, it's just the fact that game was closer than it should have been. So that, for me, that was one of those games that it's like, okay, they did well, but C.J. Stroud needs to do a little bit more to make sure that they win the game. But again, I do feel that at the end of the day, Houston will put a very valiant effort against them. But I just think that Kansas City is hard to beat that team. This season, the Kansas City Chiefs this season has shown that they're not going to be a team that can, even though they'll have their flaws and they'll have their moments where they have parts of the game and the team not all on the same page, they're still going to pull out the win. And this season, it's no different. It just seems like this season, Kansas City has done everything they could to pull and yank wins all season. I understand that they had that loss against the Bills, and of course they had the season finale against the Broncos, which doesn't really count. But still, no matter what was going on, we saw this Kansas City team pull games out over and over and over again all season, and seemed like there was nothing in their way of them marching all the way to the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs is a very tough team this season, and to be honest, it's hard for me to say this, but I have to go with it. I think Kansas City does beat the Houston Texans in a close game, in a very close game. But understand, Kansas City will find a way to come out in the end, because that's just what they do. They come down to the end, and you know, like I said, defensively, this is their strongest team that we've seen. Nick Bolton has been doing everything he's supposed to have been doing. We saw, of course, Chris Jones is what he is. Their front four has been playing phenomenally. So, I mean, they're looking great. And then, of course, you got Trent McDuffie, who's playing very well. So, there's a lot of things that is happening with this team that is really making them seem very together when it comes to it. So it's going to be a hard game, but I do say Kansas City will come out on top. I just think they have a very cohesive team together, and it seems like no matter what goes on, they're just a formidable team no matter what. The next game is the LA Chargers versus the Philadelphia Eagles, in a game that will feature some strong defense. Like, we will see a lot of defense in this game. I do feel that you'll see some offense, but not as strong as you would want it. Both teams have a very strong run defense, and they do feature not the greatest pass defense, but when you look at both teams feature very solid front fours. The Rams front four may be a little bit stronger than the Eagles front four when you think about their edge guys. The Eagles had their tackles are more formidable than the Rams tackles, but again, you're talking about this may be one of those all defensive games. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, they're gonna have to really put on a game to actually pose a serious threat to the Philadelphia Eagles. Even though the Rams really looked like they were a team on a mission, like I said, I mean, they basically boat raced Minnesota, and it just seems like if your quarterback isn't playing well, the Rams are going to come in and actually do some stuff. And Matt Stafford looks like he's kind of either he's fully healthy now, or he feels like it looks like he's re-energized, but he's been playing well. And this team has been a problem for a lot of teams, especially coming into the playoffs. And they're not joking around. They're actually looking like they want to, like, the way the team looked coming into the playoffs and in that first playoff game looks like the same team that won it all. So this is a team that shouldn't be overlooked, especially by Philadelphia, and especially when you think about what the type of problem that this team does pose to Philadelphia when you think about their passing game. Now, their running game isn't the greatest in comparison to Philly's running game, but again, this team can be a very dangerous team. On the other side, you got the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, I talked about their defense. They have a very solid defense. Offensively, they do pose one of the best offensive lines there is. But even with all that being said, sometimes I feel that their coaching, especially when it comes to Kellen Moore, I've said this about Kellen Moore. To me, I don't think he's the greatest offensive coordinator. It seems like when it comes to Saquon Barkley, once he gets his 100 yards, all of a sudden Kellen Moore just stops calling running plays. For some reason, it just seems like he stops really like calling the run plays that would be the best for Saquon Barkley. At some point, he just starts running them up the middle, and everybody's stopping him. So I do think that Kellen Moore is a problem when it comes to the Philly offense. But it also doesn't help that Jalen Hurts hasn't been playing well either. And I get that he's coming off an injury. He just got back after the long layoff and everything like that. The playoff game was his first game back. But he still doesn't look like he's all together and all there. And again, when you put that he doesn't seem like he's all there. This is his first game, and then you add the fact that Kellen Moore isn't calling the best plays, it becomes a problem. Like we're starting to see the disconnect in Philly even more, because I understand that they were trying to make it look like, oh yeah, we're all on the same page, we're brothers, we're together. But we saw what A.J. Brown was doing on that sideline. And that was probably the most deplorable thing that we could ever see. He was on the sideline sulking about not getting only catching one pass. But again, that's Kellen Moore's fault, because again, Kellen Moore should be calling plays that features A.J. Brown getting more passes thrown his way and not have this open system. Because again, you can't have a top guy and not feed that top guy. Same thing applies to the running back. Like, I've said this before. I'm glad that they haven't adopted the Mike Martz offense, because if they did, with the guys that they got featured on that team, the Eagles would be the worst team to want to face. But because Kellen Moore isn't that type of offensive coordinator, this game is going to be a tight game, especially when you talk about defensively and what's going on. The Rams show that they can get sacks. They can really get sacks. This will be the game where we really see what that Philly offensive line can do against a very formidable front four when it comes to the Rams defensive line. So I think this will be a very tight game, very, very tight game. But I do feel that the Rams are going to beat them. I just feel that Philly, even though they're very good and they're structured very well, I just feel that they're primed to get beat, because it just seems like there's a lot of disconnect on that team. And to be honest, having a disconnect on the team at the greatest point, at the biggest time of the playoffs, especially when you're talking about the divisional round, I just feel that there's a chance that they're going to be beat, and that's going to be a tough game. But like I said, it's going to be a very hard-fought game, but I think the Rams will come out on top. Last and final game, of course, is, to me, the game for, I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel Lamar Jackson already won the MVP, but I guess they will consider this game the game for the MVP, and that is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. We've seen Buffalo and Josh Allen actually have very solid games. But we've also seen them this season have very bad games, and one of the bad games they had was against this same Baltimore Ravens team. Even though it was in Baltimore still, it was a bad game that they had. Now, the one thing that a lot of teams have done, especially those teams that have beat Buffalo this season, they have stopped the run game. And everybody's talking about Josh Allen, but nobody's talking about the fact that James Cook has been very formidable this season too. And with him being able to be activated this season, it actually made Josh Allen's job a lot easier, especially when you're talking about teams. There's times where he's cutting up holes and he's sucking the defense in. He's bringing the defenders up to the line of scrimmage to try to stop the run, and then Josh Allen is throwing over the top. The difference with this game is that the Baltimore Ravens are very solid against the run. So we're going to actually see what does Josh Allen do when that running game is not there for him. Because again, he's been able to kind of coast a little bit with the assistance of the running game and James Cook, and the fact that right now Ray Davis is out, so now they don't have a formidable backup for James Cook to come in. But we'll see how that goes, because again, Josh Allen has been lucky to be able to rely on that running game. But again, in these games that he has lost, teams have stopped the run and forced Josh Allen to sit up there and try to win. A good example of this is the Rams game, where they scored, the end score wasn't really indicative of what happened in that whole game, where they scored 21 points in the fourth quarter, where the game was already out of hand. The Rams had already scored 38 points. So that was one of those games where, again, Josh Allen came in, but at the same time, Josh Allen had 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns, but that was in garbage time play. It wasn't one of those things where he had this fantastic game. So, and against the Houston Texans, he struggled. Also, like I said, the Baltimore Ravens, he struggled, and I think against the Indianapolis Colts, he had a poor game as well. So those teams took away that run, and now all of a sudden we got to see what happens when it comes down to it. Next, we got to talk about these Ravens. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens is a very strong team this season. I mean, with the addition of Derrick Henry, they did nothing but make that team, especially the offense, probably the driving force. And that's fairly unusual for a team in Baltimore, which was known and always driven by their defense. Now we see the team actually driven by their offense and their quarterback, who to me should be the league MVP no matter what goes on. And the fact that the coaching staff seems to be on the same page. Todd Monken actually has Lamar Jackson looking even better this year than he did last year, and has also had better numbers this year than he had last year. And we saw what he did to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he just carved them up and everything. I don't know if Buffalo is really ready for a Lamar Jackson type of show again. Not only that, I don't think that they're ready even for a Derrick Henry type of game. You're talking about when you have a team that just has 2 guys who could just carve you up running the ball. It's just the worst thing in the world. And then when you have Lamar Jackson, who at points in times where he's throwing the ball, and we haven't really seen the Buffalo Bills defend tight ends that well, and you're actually going up against not 1, not 2, but 3 solid tight ends that the Ravens throw out there. So again, this can be a very down game for the Buffalo Bills. I think the Ravens, everything the Ravens do has just been like on point, on key. Lamar Jackson, without a shadow of a doubt, is the league MVP, and I just don't see this train stopping for them. I actually have the Ravens beating the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be something, I tell you. It's going to be I think that this game may have some sparks in it, but I don't think that it will be filled with excitement and entertainment, because I do feel that Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are going to really, really, really find. And that's another thing. They do a fantastic job. Todd Monken does a fantastic job with adjusting in game. So if they were to stop the run game or stop Lamar Jackson, all they'll do is then start opening up the middle of the lane, the middle of the field, and it'll just be Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely the whole game. So, man, I tell you that it's a dangerous team. It's a very dangerous team. And we'll see how it goes. We'll definitely see how it goes. But that's the rundown of all of that's my preview and my prediction for the wins in these teams for this divisional round of the playoffs. Y'all tell me what y'all think. How do y'all feel about this? Tell me if y'all feel that I'm off in my predictions, or if you feel that I'm missing something that I probably didn't think about when I was talking about all the teams. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Other than that, this has been your man John Fortune, and it's been the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.